Hello there, guys, and welcome back to my channel for yet another Chelsea live stream. No games at the moment because, well, I say at the moment, until January 1st, but no games today or yesterday for the Blues. But an unbelievable amount of Chelsea news, quite frankly. I mean, I know, obviously, the World Cup, kind of made a little bit of a, what's the right word? Like, forced football news into a bit of a break, like club football news. But now it's seriously kicking off. I thought, yes, Premier League football is going on and even a few other leagues in the world. But I thought the news wouldn't be quite as crazy between Christmas and New Year's. But no, these journalists are getting absolutely no days off, including, not a journalist, but including Todd Bowley and Behdad Egbali and all sorts. We are doing all sorts of madness, and we will talk about a lot of different things today. As you can see, we're already joined by Charlie. Aaron and Lewis will be joining us. Well, Aaron should be joining us, and Lewis will be joining us. But, Charlie, first of all, thank you for being back on. I feel like it's been a minute since we streamed together, so I'm glad to see you back. How you been, number one? And number two, what you're feeling about these Chelsea news? Because there's a lot of crazy things going on at the moment.
Yeah, mate, good to be back, as always. Yeah, I'm glad that, club football's back. It was a nice break. It was good to be back at Stamford Bridge for the Bournemouth game the other night. Nice to see us get 3 points on the board. But yeah, the news is kind of mad, It's weird going straight from a World Cup straight into a transfer window. It doesn't normally happen. It's obviously very different normally in the summer months. But we're straight into a January window. We've seen Chelsea already do business. Fofana's come in from Molde. We've obviously got Andre Santos deal virtually done as well. Badiashile from Monaco, which I'm sure we'll discuss, is almost done as well. And then, you get the Enzo Fernandez news that comes through as well. And you're thinking yes, there's always going to be links with Chelsea in January. It's new owners. There's money to spend. We need players. But, it's exciting times. And, we haven't had much to cheer about on the pitch so far this season. So when you get these transfer links and you see new players come into the club and you see your club being linked with top players and through good sources, it is exciting. But there's a long way to go from kind of rumours and articles to actually seeing them in a Chelsea shirt. So you've got to sort of calm yourself down a little bit sometimes as well and not get too carried away with it.
Absolutely. I mean, you make some good points there. One other question before we get into the actual news itself. Obviously, you said you were at the game against Bournemouth. Now, myself, especially the first half, well, everything until Reece James had to come off, I was actually very, very pleased about what I saw against Bournemouth. Now, people will say, oh, it's only Bournemouth. I don't really care. How many really bad teams have we struggled against badly this season? And then we're like, well, we can't even beat those. Now we do beat them. And now our own fans are trying to talk it down because it's only Bournemouth. I'm like, well, be flipping happy. We won a game, man. But we actually played some good football. Now, maybe I was slightly exaggerating, but I was thinking about it. I was like, comparing that first half, the type of football we played, because obviously the referee robbed us, like we should have had a penalty, we should have had a third goal, blah, blah, blah. I can't even remember how many times in recent times we played good football like that. Like, it didn't really happen a lot. I know we beat AC Milan 3-0, but I don't think we played football as well in that game. Maybe the Wolves one, which is weird because we rotated the whole team against them. But then the last time that happened was the 4-0 against Juve. So, this doesn't happen that often. I know it was only Bournemouth, I'm aware. But what I always sit here and why I was so critical of Thomas Tuchel is because the guy was here for 18 months. And if anything, we slowly but surely got worse. And that is obviously a bad sign. But now I'm like, well, obviously this was only a one-off game. Things could change drastically. And come Sunday, we play against Forest. Is it Sunday, 1st of January, whatever day that is? We could be awful again. But the way we played football against Bournemouth, I'm like, yeah, if this is what we can build on, if this is what we can do regularly, I'm here for it, man. Do you see that the same, or were you not quite as excited by it?
No. Do you know what? The first half was good, but and I think it's important to contextualize the fact that yes, it is only Bournemouth, but compared to what we've seen this season, and there's been some terrible performances. This, and admittedly, the bar is pretty low. This was a vast improvement. So. It's important to say that, whilst this performance wasn't amazing and it wasn't perfect, it was so much better than anything we've seen this season. And, yes, it's only Bournemouth, but, we've been losing to teams like left, right and centre, that are in and around Bournemouth's level or a little bit better and not turning up whatsoever in the vast majority of those games. So, yes, whilst you can say it's only Bournemouth, we've not played very well at all this season and you've been in a poor run of form heading into the World Cup, losing 4 of our final 5 games. You've got to take the small positives, and it was a positive. Obviously after Reece James went off, they targeted that right-hand side more, and they looked the better side than us. But at 2-0, it doesn't really matter if they look the better side for the final half hour, because the game was in our control. And yes, you could argue it the other way, that if we let a team with better quality have the same kind of chances that Bournemouth had, or were close to having, then it could have been a different result. But it's all ifs and buts. You've got to deal with the now in the football. When the fact is we won the game, we played better than we've played in a long time. And because the bar's been so low, this was a positive to take for me. And right now, we just need to get as many points on the board as possible, because we're still 8 points off those Champions League places, and we've got tough games coming up. So, let's celebrate that whilst we can, because there's not been an awful lot to shout about this season so far.
No, exactly that. And it is always interesting, because obviously you and me, we're old enough to remember the Jose days, and being 2-0 up and then seeing out a result was the most normal thing of all time for a Chelsea fan, no matter who we played against.
1-0 was one.
Exactly.
1-0 was the game was won.
Ashraf, and I'm not having a go at you, Ashraf, at all. He says we lost the midfield against Bournemouth in the second half. I'm like, but no, we were 2-0 up. We were just seeing out a game. Plus, I stand by this. I said this in the live reaction after the game as well. I think rather than that, obviously we also lost the quality of Reece James, but I also think the psychological factor on the teammates, people underestimate that a lot, because that will play an effect on them as well. Everyone was gutted for Reece, getting injured, missing the World Cup and everything. Everyone was happy for him to be back. And for him to have to come off again injured in his first game back, that will have a psychological influence on everybody. And that will also make the rest of the team, just the intensity will drop a little bit. And in my opinion, that's what happened. I don't think we played badly all of a sudden. We just didn't have quite the same intensity, and we didn't win the ball back as soon. Therefore, Bournemouth had the ball a bit more. That, in my opinion, that's all that happened. But, hey, each to their own. I'm still going to be happy about it. Just the Reece James thing, I'm not that happy about that one. But we'll keep that one for the time being. We will get into that discussion a little bit later on. I hope Lewis joins us soon, but I do want to start this Enzo Fernandez discussion, because obviously I spoke about it with Pais. I spoke about it with Bertram. I can't remember if I spoke to anybody else about it, but I know you are, judging by the group chat where I've seen you saying that you're not quite as sold on the whole situation as maybe some other people are, in terms of just the price tag rather than him as a player. But let's just quickly to kind of summarize the news that we've had so far. Basically, Benfica really only want, or will only agree to selling him if the release clause of 120 million euros is met. Now, Fabrizio Romano said yesterday that we only have a few days to trigger that release clause, which I don't really understand, because how can you take a release clause off the market, which is how Fabrizio worded it. But I guess theoretically could contractually be in there. Okay, there's a release clause from January 1st to January 10th or 5th or whatever. That could be the case, I guess. But still, I find that unlikely. But what has also been reported is by Fabrizio and others is that because of financial fair play, we're kind of hesitant to just go in on the release clause, because if you trigger the release clause, you basically have to pay the 120 million euros, which is about 106 million pounds, all in one go. And then we could put ourselves into slight trouble with financial fair play, because comparing it to the deal with Nkunku, for example, we paid extra, so we didn't have to meet the release clause, so we can split the transfer fee up into the length of his contract, and therefore make it much easier for us to deal with in terms of financial fair play. But if we meet the release clause, we can't do that. Therefore, we have reportedly, according to, I can't remember if they're Portuguese or Argentinian, but to some source, apparently offered 130 million euros. So actually 10 million more, even though the 120 million is kind of too much for us. But basically, we're saying okay, we'll give you more, but we'll pay it out slightly differently. But so far, at least, Benfica haven't really budged to that. And, well, the reports are that they just want the release clause. Now, why Benfica, unless they're in deep money trouble right now, which I don't think they are, why they would say no to 10 million more, I don't really understand, unless they have very positive hopes that they will get much more in the summer. But won't whoever buys him in the summer just meet the release clause? I know I read somewhere today that they want to give him a new contract, but is he going to be silly enough to sign that? Surely not, right? So from that logic, just give them why don't they just accept that? In my opinion, I would be happy with it. Now, I've been speaking to Euro expert about him as well. He says, well, absolute wonderful player. Also works brilliantly well with Declan Rice together, theoretically. I'm like, Well, what more can I possibly want than that? But what is your opinion on Enzo Fernandez? Now, obviously, he only joined Benfica in the summer from River Plate in Argentina. So he's only had 6 months in Europe.
Yeah.
And 1 month of that was spent at the World Cup. But to be fair, he played all but one game for Argentina. Well, he started all but one game, I'm pretty sure, aside from the first one, which is the only one they lost, mind you. He played in different positions as an 8, as a 6, double pivot, like all sorts. And he won Young Player of the Tournament. Like, couldn't this be a bit of, like, obviously the money is very different, but couldn't this be like a bit of a Hazard signing where we just get one of these superstars like real young? You know what I mean? Like, are you not sold on it?
No, I'm not sold on it, but I think it's important to realise that, you know, whilst this guy is clearly a very talented player, I don't watch a lot of South American football, so I wasn't really that aware of him. I've become a bit more aware of him, obviously, watching Benfica in the Champions League, where he's done very well, and I've obviously become very aware of him at the World Cup. But I'm not suggesting that he's not going to become a good player or is not going to, you know, reach the very top of the game.
He's a good player already.
Or already is a good player now. But you look at it and, you know, I just have some slight reservations in terms of the fact that we've got to be careful judging players based off a tournament. I know there's a bit more to Fernandez than just the World Cup, but let's be honest, you know, like Chelsea fans that are saying, oh, we desperately want Fernandez. I'm highly doubt that very many, if any of them, have actually watched him play for River Plate at all. So they probably didn't. I doubt, again, that many have really watched him play for Benfica, unless it's in the Champions League. And then again, it probably only highlights. So, you know, the most exposure Chelsea fans have had to him is the World Cup. And a World Cup's 6 weeks. And it's, 6-7 games. And, you know, anyone can... I'm not downplaying what he's done in the World Cup. What I'm saying is that, like, anyone can have a good tournament, put 6-7 good games together, get a big move after a World Cup. We've seen it many, many times. You know, players that have a good World Cup get a big money move off the back of it, and then that form disappears. And I'm not saying that would happen with Fernandez, but I think it's important to bear that in mind. And then secondly, for me as well, is that, look, don't get me wrong, I'd be delighted if he came to Chelsea, but I do have reservations. Secondly, as well, the guy's played 6 months in Europe. He's played 24 games for Benfica. Yes, I know he's won the Copa America and he's won the World Cup, and he's played a big part in both. He's played 24 games for Benfica in total, and he's played 6 months in Europe. Now, yes, you know, the success rate from Portuguese league to the Premier League is pretty good with signings. You know, we've seen Luis Diaz come over. We've seen many players come over from the Portuguese league and make an impact. But my two main worries, I guess, is a lack of top-level experience. And that might sound silly in terms of the guy's won the World Cup and the Copa America, and he's played at Champions League football. He's played 24 games in Europe, you know, at European level.
But I will say one thing in terms of experience. Now, experience of the highest level of football, I think that's a fair point. But if we're talking experience, okay, to experience the big leagues of Europe.
Yeah, of course.
I don't think playing for River Plate is that different.
No, maybe not. But yeah, the experience at the highest level is one for me. And the other one, which again, people might argue it as a bit of a myth potentially, but I do think there's something to be said for Premier League experience as well. I'm not saying that, you know, that Declan Rice is a better player than Enzo Fernandez, for example, but I think one thing that is massively in Rice's favour is that, in the forefront of my mind, is the fact that we 100% know Declan Rice can do it in the Premier League, because we've seen it week in, week out for West Ham over a number of years. And I know there's no guarantees in football. And yes, I know that playing for Chelsea is different from playing for West Ham. But for me, the way I look at it, there's a far higher chance of Declan Rice being successful at Chelsea because of his experience in the Premier League than Enzo Fernandez being successful at Chelsea. And I'm not saying they both can't be successful, but when I'm looking at it and I think, right, we pay 120, 130 million euros, between 110, 115 million pounds potentially. And then you're looking at Declan Rice and we could spend perhaps 70 or 80 million pounds. If I've got a choice between the two, I'm thinking, well, for those two reasons alone, I'd probably rather have Declan Rice. Yes, in an ideal situation, you'd have both, but we're not made of money. You know, as you rightly said, we would look to pay more than the release clause because it would allow us to structure the payment in more favourable terms and keep us in line with FFP, like we've obviously done with the Nkunku deal. So for those reasons, you know, I would side towards, if I had to pick between the two, I'd side towards having Rice just for those reasons. I'm not saying that there's that, Enzo Fernandez is not a top player and is not going to be a top player. And I'm not saying that he wouldn't be able to do it in the Premier League, but I do just err on the slight side of caution with the amount of money being spent. And, let's be real. This is a guy that most day-to-day Chelsea fans had never have heard of really until the World Cup. If we're being real, all the guys that are saying, I know Twitter's not the best place to go, but all the people are, Enzo Fernandez is amazing. They've probably watched him play 7 games of football, if that. So I think it's important to kind of contextualize that, people haven't watched a lot of him, and then they're saying that he's amazing. I'm not saying he's not good, but people I think are getting a little bit carried away who have actually never watched him before. So for me, I would go Declan Rice over Fernandez, but I'm not against the Fernandez signing. So I do think he's a brilliant player. I've just got a few doubts, that's all.
I totally get you. Sorry, I was just slightly distracted because for some reason, the Chelsea Fans TV logo is there. And I don't know why it's there because it's not, I've not selected it anywhere. And it's not on the background thing. So I don't understand how this is there. And I don't understand how I can get rid of it, if I'm being perfectly honest. It is covered by my logo anyway. But I was just a little bit confused by that. Now, I think you make some good points. And like you say, if someone forced me to choose between Fernandez and Rice, as much as I think Fernandez might be more talented and might go on to have a bigger future even, I would also pick Rice over Fernandez as of right now. Like, for various reasons. Part of it is what you said in terms of having played in the Premier League. We know what we're going to get. But for me, even more than that, it's the style of player that we need and the styles of players that we have already. I know, I'm not sure if you read that, but me and Jem were kind of going back and forth about, is Enzo Fernandez and Kovacic, are they quite similar and stuff? And I see there quite a significant amount of similarities. Now, obviously, not everything is the same. Fernandez is not as good at dribbling as Kovacic is, but Fernandez is much better at shooting than Kovacic is, and also playing deep, passes from deep and stuff. He's much better at that. But I still see certain similarities between the two. While I'm like, we don't have someone like Rice, and we've required someone like Rice for way too long. I said this for years. I never said it has to be Rice. If someone can bring me someone that has the attributes of Rice and is someone different to Rice, I'm fine with that. But so far, no one has given me a valid different option to Rice that is like Rice. So far, no one has offered that to me. So that's why I would pick Rice rather than that. I think he's better. I just think we need that more. And we have something closer to Fernandez already as it is. But the reportedly suggests that we want both. I mean, bloody David Ornstein, we will get the article up later when we talk about N'Golo Kante. He says we want, Fernandez, Bellingham, bloody Rice. I say that we want bloody everyone. We can't get everyone. But if it's two of them, I'm not going to complain. I'll take both. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. What I would say, though, is that I think if Chelsea want to get Enzo Fernandez, we have to do it in January because I don't think we've got any chance in the summer. I think that's what Bowley and co are looking at, and they're thinking, right, if it goes to the summer, we've got virtually no chance of getting Enzo Fernandez because there'll be more suitors. The teams that are in for Bellingham and they're in for Rice and whatnot, the teams that miss out on those two players will then join the race for Enzo Fernandez. And if you're Enzo Fernandez and you've got, say, the choice of Real Madrid potentially, PSG, Liverpool, Man United, other teams, and Chelsea are in the mix as well. As much as it pains me to say it, we're near the bottom of that list of suitors, and the fact that we may not have any Champions League football to throw into the mix next season either is going to be tricky. In terms of Fernandez, I think, as I said, Bowley looking to be opportunistic in terms of the facts like, can we get ahead of the queue? Let's offer a little bit more money. Because for me, the only way Chelsea get Fernandez is if they get him in this window. And even if it's a deal where we agree to sign him and he stays on loan at Benfica for the end of the season and we get him for the summer, that's fine. But I think if we're going to get him, we have to do this deal now because I don't envisage a scenario how we can actually get him in the summer and beat those other clubs to his signature.
Yeah, there you go. I agree with that, actually. I agree that if we don't do it now, then we're not going to get him. It's also a case of, for the books, it's arguably better to sign one really expensive one now and one really expensive one in the summer, if anything, anyway. Now, Ashraf in the chat said here, Benfica just released a statement, Enzo off. Now, I just opened Benfica's Twitter. I didn't see a statement, so I'm not sure what you're talking about. Someone else now replied to you saying Enzo ain't off, just need to trigger the release clause, which we kind of know as it is, but we just also know that Chelsea are kind of hesitant to slightly do this, sorry. So it is a weird one. I have still no idea where Aaron is. Not sure if he will join us in the end or not. What happened there? Hopefully he didn't die. Do you know what I mean? You know, be well, Aaron. But yeah, hopefully Lewis should join us very, very soon. But yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one for me because the money, I agree with you, it's big money for what he's actually done. Now, we're both aware. Benfica's official statement on Enzo Fernandez, we insist. Okay, let me just highlight it in a second so we can bring that up. 1 second. There you go. Benfica's official statement on Enzo Fernandez. We insist, saying that our intention is to keep Enzo here until the end of the season. Benfica clarified that our president, Rui Costa, I assume not Rui Costa, never spoke to the zone about the situation of Enzo Fernandez. All right.
Those quotes from Rui Costa are made up then?
That would be funny. They do want to keep him until the summer. That everyone's aware. But, well, I guess I was going to say, but they also said, you know, if the release clause is met, they will let him go. But this is not. It's not up to them. Then that's the whole point for release.
I also look at it from an Enzo Fernandez perspective, and I'd be thinking, I've just won the World Cup. I've won the Copa America already. Why would I leave in January when in the summer I can virtually pick wherever I want to go? Like for me, for Enzo Fernandez's career at 21 and what he's achieved so far and at this stage of his career, for me, it makes virtually no sense for him to leave in January. Why have you Enzo Fernandez? Would you leave Benfica in January when you can stay for another 6 months, get a bit more experience? Benfica have got a decent Champions League draw against Bruges. They're an exciting young team. Who knows how far they could go in that competition? Like, why? If I'm Enzo Fernandez, why I wouldn't even entertain the thought of leaving in January?
It's a difficult one, I guess, because for Enzo Fernandez, obviously, as much as he's super talented, he's still very young. Like he's 21 right now. Is he for those other teams that are interested in him? Will he be as regularly of a starter from day one as he will be for us? So you could argue that benefit we do have over potentially some others, like I say a Real Madrid or a Man City. If these guys are interested, will he start for them from day one? Maybe not. For us, he will. So if that is partly on his mind, I can see that. But in general, I do agree. I said this yesterday to you in the chat, I think, where I'm like, if I'm Enzo, I would probably stay until the end of the season. But, you know, thankfully, I'm not Enzo, and maybe he has a different opinion to this. I mean, so, you know, from that perspective, it's a difficult one. But we are also now apparently linked to Moise Caicedo from Brighton. And it seems like, according to David Ornstein, again, we will highlight the article once we talk about N'Golo Kante, that we will bring one midfielder in at least this January window. Now, if it's not Enzo, are we, like, what are you happy with? Because obviously Caicedo is one of those things, because Caicedo then obviously has the Premier League experience, but, I mean, Caicedo has not won the World Cup.
He'll be
Caicedo
70.
has not, you know, stood out as this super, super, super talent of world football. And it's not exactly going to be super cheap either.
Mate, he'd be 70, 80 million pounds. Like,
exactly.
I mean, I was speaking to Ben Jacobs about this a week or so ago, and he was saying, you know, that Chelsea may well go back in for Edson Alvarez, but of course, because it's new management now and Graham Potter, do they admire the player the same way as Thomas Tuchel did, as the previous kind of regime did, Marina Cech, etc. So remains to be seen, like, will Chelsea go back in for Edson Alvarez? I mean, he didn't really get in the Mexico team at the World Cup, which was a bit of a surprise for me. I don't know if that's gone off the boil. You're looking at other names and you think, well, Caicedo, as you said, virtually, I'd say almost no chance. Certainly no chance in January. I don't think Brighton would sell unless they received 70, 80 million.
To us at this point. I feel like they're not big fans of us nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, 70, 80 million pounds. I don't think Chelsea are going to be in a position to go and do that. And then I see people in the chat talking about Romeo Lavia from Southampton. Two things on that Ben Jacobs told me was that, one, Southampton aren't best pleased with Chelsea over the Joe Shields situation, which I think is common knowledge. Joe Shields obviously was instrumental in bringing Lavia to Southampton. He, again, has only been there since the summer, plus
Where was
Manchester
he before, actually? I don't even know.
I think he was on loan somewhere, but he was from Manchester City. So Man City have got first refusal on him. So if someone bids, they've got an opportunity to match that offer. And again, Lavia would cost a lot of money because he's only just been there, and City can obviously match that. So there's not that many options out there. We're talking about improving the first 11. You know, there really isn't that many players out there. So you look at maybe getting, other than Enzo, you're not going to get Declan Rice in the summer. In January. We know that. Edson Alvarez remains to be seen if he'll go back in for it or not. But in terms of quality midfielders for the sort of money we might be looking to spend, there isn't that many out there. So I can understand why Chelsea are looking to do this and get Enzo Fernandez in, because you look at the other options, and whilst they're not terrible options, there's nothing out there that you think, do you know what, that would be a decent player to go and sign. I think it's really important that also we don't just sign a midfield player in January for the sake of signing a midfield player. Don't sign someone in January that you wouldn't think about signing in the summer. You know, you've got to sign someone that you would sign come the summer or whatever. Don't just sign a midfield player for the sake of it. So it'll be interesting to see sort of what midfielders they do go for, because there's not that many out there that are going to make a big difference to the first team.
Yeah, no, I agree. Since then, we have been joined by the wonderful carefree Lewis G. Thank you, Lewis, for joining us.
Big up, bro.
I have two questions.
Big up, Charlie.
Number one, do you know why there's the Chelsea Fans TV logo on here and I can't get rid of it?
Yeah, we use this for the podcast as well.
How do I get rid of it?
Wait, is this still up there? What?
It's not selected anywhere. I don't understand how this is happening.
There you go. There, it's gone now.
Maybe you only had the option.
Yeah, maybe because I put it on earlier. I don't know.
That's no dramas. I just didn't know how to get rid of it.
I didn't even notice it, but yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
Big up everyone though. Hit the like button because I know we ain't got enough likes in here. So run up the likes.
We definitely don't. I haven't told them yet. So please, ladies and gentlemen, do smash the like button and subscribe. Lewis, though. Enzo Fernandez, before we move on, because myself and Charlie have already spoken about it for a little bit now. Enzo Fernandez, are you interested? And what are your thoughts on the whole situation? Okay, we can't pay or we don't want to pay the release clause all in one go, because then you have to pay all the money in one go. Like I say, we want to pay more so we can structure the payment terms better for ourselves. So what are your thoughts on the whole Enzo Fernandez thing? Like, are you really interested, or are you it's just too much money? Like, what are your thoughts?
I'd say it's too much for a lot of midfielders, but for the age and for what Fernandez would bring and what he's already done as well, I wouldn't mind us putting everything into the market for this guy, because I feel like the profile of player is just in general something that we've not only just lacked consistently, but one that benefits the team so well. Someone who's a ball winner, but is very good on the ball as well. Someone who's very good in terms of picking out passes, dictating the tempo of games. We need that in our squad. And with his age, with his ceiling, it's a great long-term investment for Chelsea. So I would understand if we put all of our money on the table with this one. But the bigger question to me would be who'd be sacrificed as a result. I would have said Kante, but with the recent contract news that we've just heard, maybe he's going to be the one that we keep. Maybe it means Jorginho goes. I've heard Ruben could potentially be leaving. Maybe even Kovacic, because he's not really too sure whether his future's at Chelsea or not. So we could easily finance this use a portion of it off player sales, but I would like us to go in for Enzo. And if you want to pay the money, I wouldn't really hold it against the club for doing that. I think he's worth it.
Fair. Like I said, I'll be down. And obviously, Charlie, what I wanted to reply to you already. You know how you were saying most people haven't really watched him, and we've seen him all at the World Cup, but who has really seen anything from him before that? And most people that say they have are probably lying, or they've seen YouTube compilations, and YouTube compilations don't count. In YouTube compilations, you'd think Alvaro Morata is the greatest striker in history. Do you know what I mean? Like, YouTube compilations are different. The one thing I will say is, I'm a fan, and we've just spent the last 6 months at this football club putting people in place that know these things, right? Like that's why we employed all these new people to make our recruitment better. And also that's why I spoke to someone like your expert who has watched a lot more of a player like Enzo Fernandez. That's why I ask, that's why I'm not asking randomers on Twitter. I'm asking people, I'm like, okay, yeah, you probably would have actually watched him, so you have an idea. And everyone that has is all full of praise for him. So from that perspective, that's why I'm not going to let the whole he's only played in Europe stuff for 6 months, be too much of an issue, because I'm like, well, if you go by that logic, how many superstar players would not have been signed because, people were like too hesitant to sign them, I guess. But it's just a lot of money. So it is a bit difficult. But Lewis, I think you brought up an important thing here. So let's get actually to talking about that and go to Kante situation, because when that came, out by David Ornstein, like an hour or so ago, that is crazy news. Now, or whatever it was, The Athletic reported that Jorginho is expected to leave at the end of the season. To be fair, they also said Kante is expected to leave at the end of the season. And now, out of nowhere, apparently, according to probably the most reliable source in England, Chelsea make positive progress in talks over new N'Golo Kante contract. And it's not long, so I'll quickly read through it. Chelsea have made positive progress in talks over a new contract for N'Golo Kante. There is now increasing confidence that the France international will commit his future to the club. Kante's existing deal expires at the end of this season, and The Athletic revealed in September that he was unwilling to accept the fresh terms proposed verbally by Chelsea last summer. They suggested tying down the 31-year-old midfielder for 2 years, plus the option of a third, whereas he wanted a longer duration. Having been sidelined for a lengthy period following hamstring surgery, there was a genuine prospect that no solution would be found and Kante might leave as a free agent. But Chelsea always wanted him to stay. They viewed the 2018 World Cup winner as a legend and an extremely popular figure. And recent dialogue has generated optimism that Kante is likely to extend his career at Stamford Bridge. The contract length remains a key issue. However, Chelsea are actively working to strike a compromise that would see them retain the services of a player regarded among the best in the world when he is available for selection. As things stand, overseas sides will be able to secure Kante to a pre-contract from January 1st, with suitors from Spain and France prepared to do so. There are also admirers from the Premier League eager to capitalise. Irrespective of the Kante situation, Chelsea are trying to strengthen in this area off the pitch, and at least one recruit is expected in the upcoming transfer window or the subsequent market. They hold concrete interest in Enzo Fernandez and Jude Bellingham, while other options under consideration include the likes of Declan Rice, Moise Caicedo, Romeo Lavia. Such names are on the radar of rival teams too, and currently it is unclear which of them could go where. Lewis, I'll actually start with you. What do you think about this? To me, I find this a little bit... Oh, sorry, Lewis is not on screen. So I'll start with you, Charlie. To me, this is a little bit mental, because Kante hasn't played a single minute of football all season, and we're now... I'm okay with giving him a contract in general. I think it's probably better if we cut ties because he's just injured too much. But surely we should wait until he's back, see how he's actually doing. And if he's actually willing to sign a new contract, do it then. Not now while he's injured and we have no idea what he's going to be like when he's back. Obviously, we don't know. Nothing was said in terms of what his wages are going to be. Is he going to take a pay cut? Is he going to stay on the same? Are we even going to increase his wages? We don't know that. But to me, it still seems a little bit insane to give a 31-year-old player, a contract extension while he's been injured for basically 6 months straight. To me, that's insane. Well, what do you think about that, John?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a strange one for me, because I look at it and I just think, look, there's no doubt Kante's a world-class player and he's put in some great performances for us. And on his day, there's hardly anyone, if anyone, better than him. Problem is that his day is becoming less and less often and he cannot keep himself fit. It's irrelevant how good he is, because if we're not going to use him on the pitch, then there's no point. So for me, one thing I do worry about is, are we just working on a new contract because we're worried that he might go to a Premier League rival? That's one of my concerns. I'll be offering him a new...
Give him a new contract, sell him to PSG for 20 million in the summer. I don't care. If we can therefore stop him from going to Arsenal or Tottenham, I'm all for it.
I just look at it and I think, should we be moving on? Are we just offering him a new deal for sentimentality reasons rather than footballing ability? Because let's be real, Kante is not the same player that he has been at Chelsea in, say, certainly in his first 3 or so years at the club. The last 2 seasons, you could argue, yes, he was instrumental in that Champions League run, but Premier League form, he's like turned into sort of like a 1 in 5, 1 in 6 guy in terms of putting in decent performances, which is a massive drop off from what we've expected from him. And then you kind of couple it in with the fact that he just cannot stay fit. You know, what we'd just be paying him hundreds of thousands of pounds a week to sit on the treatment table, which is just a complete waste of money. You know, I highly respect what he's done for the club, but I think if we're going to sign him on a new deal, which I don't have a problem with, it has to be on vastly reduced wages, has to be a short-term contract, and has to be heavily incentivized, like appearance-based bonuses in order to trigger additional years of the contract or whatever it is. Because right now, you're going to struggle to get
a lot of the wages should be
exactly.
Based.
And you're going to struggle to get 20 games a season out of Kante. And if you can't get 20 games a season out of a player, I'm sorry, there's just no point having them.
There you go. I completely agree. But I also agree with this comment here from RD. Letting him leave for free, to be honest, letting him leave anywhere, it doesn't, like, as much as from a logical point of view in my mind, I totally understand and I'm aware that we probably should let him go. But it just doesn't quite sit right, especially while we hear that he wants to stay in London and there's a chance he might end up at someone like Arsenal or Spurs. But Lewis, what are your thoughts? When you saw this earlier, I was a bit shocked, I can't lie, when this all of a sudden came out.
Because we heard that his terms were very similar to what he wanted, to what he was already on, and that he wanted 3+1. So if I hear this, I'm either thinking either Kante's lowered his terms or Chelsea have just relented and they're going to give him that. And to me, 4 years and being one of our highest earners when you're barely fit to be on a football pitch isn't the right move for us. If he was on reduced wages, I don't mind. I genuinely don't mind because I think he could be a decent rotation option for us. But if he wants first team starter wages and a first team starter contract length, then no, I don't want that because I can't trust him to be available for that long. Yeah, he might be a bit more fit after surgery. He also might not. We're speculating. All that we've seen for the last 3 years is that he's very injury prone. And even in spite of the injuries, he is declining. Let's call it what it is. The player has been on a decline. He looked terrible for long periods of last season. He's a Chelsea legend. Like, I've got enough love for N'Golo Kante, but as a player,
I'll be honest, I do think we can get more out of Kante than Tuchel did because Tuchel literally turned Kante into our most offensive midfielder at times, which I would just never understand why that was ever a thing. And I don't think Potter would do that. So I think Kante would look better again if fit. But like you say, would he ever be fit? And hey, Lewis turns Charlie. Up and we even did a super chat just to say hello to Charlie. To Lewis. Big up yourself, Charlie. Appreciate it.
Big up, my guy.
But go on, sorry.
But yeah, Kante has quietly been declining as a player in general. His final ball's only got worse over the last 3 years. Positionally, he's not really as aware as he used to be. He had a good game against Spurs, decent against Everton, but that was it. And last season, he wasn't good enough. He really wasn't good enough for long periods. There was a couple good games here and there, but that's it. We're in the middle of a rebuild. We're not even in the middle of a rebuild. We're at the start of a rebuild. We shouldn't be trying to hold on to players for sentimental purposes. Keep Kante as rotation, but that's it. I don't want us to be relying on Kante week in and week out because we can't trust him to be fit week in and week out. And if he gets more injured, then we're in the same position next season that we're in right now.
Yeah, I hear that. I mean, mate, let me play slightly devil's advocate, and you can kind of.
By the way, President Jafar, let's not act like Barcelona have made smart decisions in the last 5 years. Like, come on, man.
Very true. Very true. In terms of just, we were talking about how to finance a deal like Enzo Fernandez, we will need to sell some players. In general, we need to sell some players anyway. Whether those might end up being like a Gallagher or a Loftus-Cheek or a Ziyech or those types of players. Maybe the idea is, Kante, give him a new contract, keep him, but realistically, he's not going to be fit all the time, so use him sporadically. And then have just a super, squad player. Rather than having Loftus-Cheek or Gallagher as squad players, have Kante as the squad player and use Gallagher and Ruben to bring some cash in. which you can't with Kante because either he leaves on a free or you give him a new contract. Those are your two options. So I guess from that perspective, I could kind of somehow see the logic. But again, the problem is, and people say we're disrespecting him, the point is that the guy has basically been injured consistently for 3 years. 2.5 years. Like, that's just too long. And someone said, look at Modric. Yeah, but Modric has never been injured, basically, let alone consistently for 2.5 years.
This is so
not everyone can
stupid,
play until
man.
they're 39, and Kante most certainly can't.
Sentimentality will kill this fan base, man. Let's just call it a word. The player don't know you. So just be real about the player. You're treating him like he's your lover or something. Kante has been a great player for us. He is not the same player right now. We can't rely on him. The guy wants 3+1 years, and he hasn't played 3+1 games. Let's not do this. Let's call it what it is, man. We are 8th in the league table, and we're talking about re-signing a player on the same wages that he's at when he's barely fit for us. He got those wages when he was a first-team player that could literally play week in and week out. And Conte overused him, Sarri overused him, and he hasn't been the same since.
Even Lampard overused him, brought him back too quickly every time, as did Tuchel.
Exactly. He's not the same player as a result of it now.
And this injury as well, by the way, that he picked up against Spurs, second game of the season, this was an injury that Tuchel said, he'll be out for a couple of weeks. It's been about 5-6 months it's going to be.
Yeah, he had a setback and then needed surgery. Do you know what I mean?
And there's no guarantees either, by the way, that once he gets back to playing for Chelsea, which might be at the start of March or whatever, he's going to have to be slowly eased back in, that he's going to be as good as he was before. You know, he could just be...
You think you can trust our medical team to do that?
Exactly. And like, people don't understand that, like, it's complete waste of money and it's a waste of a squad space if you've got someone on huge wages that can't even be fit for... you wouldn't even trust Kante to be fit for 10 Premier League games a season right now. It doesn't make any sense, and people need to realize that you can differentiate between thinking it doesn't make sense to keep Kante
just
now.
Look at the picture we have on screen. Yeah. Just look at the fact that The Athletic used a picture of N'Golo Kante in last year's kit.
Mate, he's played about 60 minutes of football this year.
He played 2 games since that picture.
Yeah, 1.5 games.
But people want to bring him on a 3+1 because it's N'Golo Kante, legend tax. No, keep N'Golo if it's on a rotation role with reduced wages or performance-induced wages. That's fine. I don't mind keeping Kante like that. If you want him on the same wages, you're an enemy of progress.
But elite level sport is not a sentimentality business. You have to be ruthless at the top end of sport. You don't just dish hundreds of thousands of pounds a week out because you know, Kante was really good a few years ago. We've got to deal with the reality of the situation right now. We're not offering Kante a new contract based on what he did for us 3 years ago. We've got to be looking at it and basing it on what can this guy offer us for the next 2-3 years potentially. And as sad as it is to say, I'm looking at N'Golo Kante, and in the next 2 or 3 years, I'm thinking this guy doesn't really offer that. He's not bringing that much to the table. And the same people that are going on about, you guys are disrespecting Kante, if Fernandez and Rice come in the summer, no one's going to be talking about N'Golo Kante. So, you know, you can't just be like, you're disrespecting
unless he's
him.
On the same wages.
Unless, yeah. But like, it's not,
sorry, go on.
No, sorry, it's not disrespecting him. It's just, it's an admittance of the situation that we're in, that despite how good Kante's been, he's not that guy anymore, and we have to treat him as not that guy. So he should be given.
I also think, he should be when I read that, you know, he's not happy with the 2+1 year. I think offering him 2+1 was already being nice of us. The fact that he wasn't happy with that and he's like, no, I want 3+1. I'm like, bro, you've been injured for 2 years straight. Everyone always makes Kante out of this nice guy. I'm like, well, if he's this nice guy, can he not be aware that he's basically been a complete waste of wages for 2.5 years straight? And it would be at least, you know, come a little bit in our direction, give us a compromise from your end as well. And be like, okay, I'll take the 2 years then, not the 3, because I'm constantly injured. So I can't sit here and demand 3+1 years. If he did that, perfectly fine. But people make him out like he's this perfect little child that we need to just pamper consistently. I'm like, the guy isn't even accepting that he's injured all the same. And people say hold the same energy for Reece James. Reece James is not at the end of a contract. And Reece James is also not 31 years old. So what the fuck are you talking about?
Thank you. Took the words out of my mouth. Literally, all this waffle about James and Fofana, they are on 6-year deals. They are 23 years old and they are 21 years old. You can still base the next couple of years around how you add other players into taking less of the responsibility for them, like we've been saying with Reece James. And also, if we want to be real about it, Reece James is more important to us than N'Golo Kante. We have been fine in games without Kante because we have had the likes of Reece James in the squad. As soon as we lose Reece James, we fall off a cliff. As soon as we lose N'Golo Kante, it's not the same. It is not the same. So let's not do
but
this.
Also because we're so used to having lost him by now.
One's 31, one will get better, one will not get better. It's as simple as.
It genuinely is as simple as that.
Kante won't get any better now. Like this level, whatever this level he comes back at, that will be what it is. There's no the ceiling's been reached. I think we got some very good years out of Kante, and I think that ultimately this is going to be that was the best it was going to be. Kante's not going to hit those heights again. Yes, he can be a very useful squad player for us, but as we've all said, it's got to be on terms that are preferable for the club. And that is on drastically reduced wages. And that is on a heavily incentivized contract that either gets money based on a certain amount of appearances being made, and extra year on a deal gets triggered by playing in a certain amount of games each season. Because otherwise it doesn't make any sense at all. And the club are just being taken for mugs if they do that. So, whilst I'm not against him staying, it has to be on what works for the club, not what works for Kante. Mm-hmm. And if that means Kante leaves, then so be it, because no player is bigger than the football club. And I'll be saying the same thing if this was anyone else in this situation. It's nothing to do with the fact it's Kante. It's the fact that it doesn't make any business sense to give in to the demands of an injury-prone 31-year-old.
Exactly. But I do find a lot of you guys in the chat a little bit strange. You're comparing completely different things here. Now you're having a go at Chilwell, who was signed injured, which... that's not Chilwell's fault then. That is the club's fault that we signed him injured. So you can't have a go at Chilwell for that. But also, what I don't see why people don't understand is Kante has constantly had muscle injuries. The other guys, even Reece James, Chilwell, all these guys have had impact injuries which happened due to being unlucky, right? Chilwell did his ACL after contact. Reece James did his knee ligament against AC Milan after contact, and Fofana did his suffered his knee injury after contact on the pitch. Not just Kante, literally just played for the first time in months, and had to come off after 12 minutes or whatever that game was, 20 minutes. How can you compare tendon injuries that happen from contact impact with others compared to you can't even run for 20 minutes? That's not the same thing.
Bro, don't argue with stupid people. They will drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. This is why I don't deal with Kante stands anymore. They're all just mongs. They just like the player and they want to love the player off, but they're not going to listen to logic and reason. Cool. You can keep him on 3+1 wages for 350k a week or whatever the fuck it is he's on. Once he's injury prone again and we have a bunch of other midfielders trying to come in and they want the same wage as him because they offer more than him and they're more available and we're complaining about the wage structure, cool. We can have a conversation then. It's fine. But you already know you're not going to agree with people in general.
No, exactly.
Kante stands like Kante stands.
That's funny.
King A is hella triggered, bro.
If you're not aware, King A, it's
bro.
Posh Boy's channel which you're watching. So if you don't like it, you can just go. I'm not forcing you to be it. But anyway, what I quickly want to talk about along with this story is now there was stories that Kante and Jorginho might leave come the summer. I always found it unlikely that we would let both go. And I thought we might give Jorginho a new contract. Now, especially the Kante stance, which obviously comes straight from my throat now. That has different explanations. Two reasons, mainly. Number one, Jorginho's wages are drastically
Jorginho is never injured. What is your point?
Exactly. That's the second reason. Georgie's wages are way less than Kante, less than half of Kante's wages is what Jorginho is currently on. And he's also always fit. And I don't want Jorginho to be a starter anymore come next season. I want him to be a backup. If anything, I want him to teach Declan Rice how to dictate games better. That's what I want. I want us to sign Rice, bring Rice's physicality, strength, pace, blah, 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 and have Jorginho make him a better player.
But doesn't this mean, though,
perfect Declan Rice? That's what I would want. But
do you reckon
if Kante a new contract, do you think that means Jorginho is gone, Charlie?
Well, that's what I was about to say, mate. Like, this news coming out, I think I'd be stunned, although nothing would surprise me with this club, that if both of them stayed. I've always of the opinion that it was either one or they both go. Now, if it looks like, according to Ornstein, who's obviously very reliable, then I think it looks like Kante could be edging towards staying, which you then therefore think that, well, that means Jorginho is going to leave. And out of the two, it's not about who's a better player, Jorginho or Kante, because Kante is obviously a better footballer. But in terms of right now, Jorginho is better just fundamentally because he's actually available to play for the fucking team. You know, so
the guy plays basically every word. Game, sorry.
So I would be, I don't know. Look, I'm not going to say that I'd be disappointed if. Look, I'll be disappointed if Jorginho ends up leaving on a free and we keep Kante, but Kante can still be a valuable member of the squad. But that for me, there's far more chance of getting decent squad minutes out of Jorginho than there is out of Kante. And I think Jorginho is actually more valuable to the squad based on the fact that, you know, he's actually fit and he plays. You know, there's no point having good players like Kante if they're never fit. It's utterly worthless. You might as well have one of us three in the squad because we're playing exactly the same amount of minutes. We're not contributing in any single way at all. So
I'd be down to get 290k per week for being injured.
Yeah, that's a dream, bro. No wonder he wants to stay.
No, exactly. I would too if I was him. But that, you know, Bazooka, especially how you say France haven't won anything since. And number one, they made a World Cup final. But also, I mean, Brazil haven't won anything since 2002. Do you think they should play R9 Ronaldo today? Or like, he's still injured. I understand if he was fit and this was his first injury in 2 years, we would of course all be speaking very differently about this. None of us are questioning N'Golo Kante's ability, even if he's slowly on the decline because he's
I'm questioning it a little bit.
Well, yeah, okay, a little bit, but in the grand scheme of things, that's not the main issue here. So I don't understand why people.
Mate, if he's been on the decline for 2 years straight, people have ignored it because of a nice 3-month run in the Champions League run to the final, and we're just going to ignore the fact his final ball has disappeared. He barely looks positionally aware and can barely keep fit for 4 games. But all right, cool.
No, exactly. It's just strange. But Lewis, what are your thoughts on I guess with the Jorginho situation then? Like, would you have preferred, like, if you had to pick between the two, would you have preferred Jorginho to stay? And now that
I'd keep Jorginho every day ending in a Y. He'll stay more fit. He won't complain
also now
about
that if Kante stays, would you keep both?
To me, it was if they want to stay as rotation options, I am fine with it. Both should not be starting for us next season.
Agreed.
Both could provide some experience and some positive vibes to the dressing room and everything like that. You could do with leaders like that, especially with the squad being considerably younger when we go into next season. I'm fine with that. It's about if we're treating them like they're starters. That's the problem. Kante wants to be treated like a starter. Everything we've heard is basically said that he wants the same wages. He shouldn't be getting that because he's one of our highest earners. Jorginho's on like 150k a week. If he gets a 20, 30k pay rise, I don't really care too much. The fact is he shouldn't be starting next season either. But Jorginho could still offer me better availability. Both could offer me something off the bench, but one's asking for considerably less terms than the other.
Yeah.
So I'd lean more to Jorginho, but both shouldn't be starting for us next season.
If they both stay, though, and 2 midfielders come in, like we fully expect to happen, could even be more, then that means that basically out of Kovacic, Gallagher, and Ruben, probably 2 of those have got to leave as well. Yeah. So, like, you sort of think about it in the long term, or I'm not saying that Ruben is a long-term solution at Chelsea, but you look at it and you think, right, is it worth keeping 2 guys in their 30s and then get rid of 2 players in their mid to early 20s? Does that make sense? I mean,
I guess if we keep signing all these super young players, then I guess it works out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I suppose you look at it from a money perspective as well, and you think, I don't know how much money you'd get for Ruben, but you'd like to think for Conor Gallagher, you'd probably get 30, 40 million quid for him. which
Yeah,
could be which could be important to the club. So I
which
suppose
is
you've got to look at
probably
it.
why we want to sell him, because we won't get that money for Kante anymore, but we will for Gallagher. And if we need money, it makes more sense to sell a Gallagher.
Well, it does. But yeah, for me, there should only one of these two should be staying. We have to move forward as a football club. We can't just keep players hanging around for the sake of what they've done a couple of years ago. We have to move forward. And, you know, we've said it all, you know, Kante fine to stay, but he's got to be a squad player because you cannot guarantee that he's going to be fit for any amount of games that we need him for.
Exactly that. One guy in the chat, and a lot of people in the chat, in my opinion, haven't made super smart comments. Sorry, chat. But I saw an interesting comment a minute ago, which leads us nicely onto the next topic, because they have said our medical department has been absolutely diabolical for a long time now. And I do want to talk about that in terms of Reece James, also Wesley Fofana. And what he mentioned is, could a better medical department also make Kante more useful again? Because we have a go at them with the Reece James situation, with the Wesley Fofana situation. It's at least fair enough of a point to at least mention. I'm not saying you're right. I can't remember the person that said it. I'm not saying they're right, but it's at least a point to make. And I'll bring up my own tweet just because of what I said alongside, even if you can't see all of that right now. The Reece James situation. Now, what pisses me off is that Chelsea don't give any useful information. Now, they gave us the information it will be out for up to 1 month. The journalist told us 3 to 4 weeks. Reece James himself said 3 to 4 weeks. But they didn't say anything in terms of how did the injury happen? Like, was it an impact? Was it overstressed because he played too soon? Like, what actually happened, right? Because that's what I want to know. Because the fact that Reece James got injured in October, then misses the World Cup, trains for a month, plays a friendly for 65 minutes. Now, I know it's a friendly, not the same intensity as the Premier League, but still, played 65 minutes in a friendly, and then does his knee in again after 50 minutes in the first game that he plays that a proper game. Is like, what is the situation? Now, it could be purely unlucky. It could be. But the fact that it happened, the same thing, basically the same thing, both with a knee injury and both suffered a re-injury of the same knee within the space of a week, Fofana and James. Surely, like, the Broja is completely separate from this. Like, I know Broja suffered the injury against Aston Villa, but that's purely unlucky. We all know that. But that Reece James and Fofana in situation is a serious issue. And what Jester says here, they fired the head of the medical department. Absolutely. But what they didn't do is employ any new people, at least not publicly. Like, they haven't announced that they have employed anybody new since getting rid of the head of medical department for the last 17 years. They haven't replaced that person. So that makes me question the whole situation even more. Lewis, I'll go with you first. What is your view on this? Like, do we have a serious medical department issue? I mean, bloody Dubois tweeted Eva Canero basically needs to go back. And in Spanish, Gibraltar slang, she basically replied, all right, let's go then, type thing, which I'd be a fan of just for the nostalgia. But is it a worry for you? Like, is the medical department a worry for you? Or do you think we're just getting really unlucky here?
I don't know, because it's all very speculative right now, but it doesn't look good. Like, with Reece James, I saw the stuff that his trainer put out saying that he was holding his tongue because where is it? I've got it on here, don't I? Yeah, this. I want to bite my tongue despite having a lot to say. That didn't look good. With Ben Chilwell, we already saw that he had bandages on his hamstring the day before the Salzburg game, the Zagreb game, and we still made him play a full 90, despite that game being absolutely useless to us. You're already through, we're already group winners. So I don't know. It doesn't look good from the outside looking in, but I still think it's a little bit early to say, but it doesn't look good for our medical team, because this is the second time now that we look to have rushed players back too early, and it's also with two players that have been injury prone recently. So yeah, it doesn't look great from our end, but I'd have to see at least one or two more situations before I'm really jumping down their throat saying you guys are the problem, because I don't know right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, it is a fair point. We don't know. I'm just basically posing the question because it's just like just Reece James in itself would obviously be bad enough, especially for the team. But the fact that the same thing happened to two players in the space of a week to me is majorly concerning. I mean, the club literally only says defender Reece James underwent assessment earlier today. This is from yesterday, by the way. After being substituted during the second half of last night's 2-0 Premier League victory over Bournemouth due to a knee injury. Scan results have regrettably confirmed the setback for the 23-year-old, with Reece now set to be ruled out for up to a month. Again, a bloody setback. What does that mean? Like, did he re-injure the tendon? Like, if he re-injured the tendon, that's not just a setback.
But they say up to a month. Let's be honest, though, it's going to be 5 to 6 weeks before we see him actually playing again. And we have to just ease him back in. So till he's regularly starting for the club again, it could be 7-8 weeks. And that might sound like a ridiculous thing to say. And I've basically doubled the timescale. But is that a month until he's back in training? Is that a month until he's ready to play again? We've got to be careful. And you can look at it like twofold. We've rushed players back. We did it under Thomas Tuchel. But I can understand. I'm not blaming Graham Potter for starting Reece James yesterday. You could look at it. It's only Bournemouth. We should have not started him. But the fact of the matter is that we've lost to teams like Bournemouth this season a number of times, and we had to pick up a win in this game.
Bournemouth since like 2017 or something.
Yeah, and we had to pick up a result in this game. So I can understand why he's not taken the risk to not start him, given how important he is to us, and given the fact that in the games that he missed from when he got injured to the World Cup, we won one of those games, and that was away at Villa, and we were lucky to win that game. So, he's so important to the team. So I can understand why they'd push it to the max and get him back into the team as soon as possible. And of course, I'm sure the medical staff communicate with Graham Potter and the coaching staff, and they'll be like, look, we recommend Reece plays X amount of minutes or whatever. But when you go and ask a player if they're ready to play, even if they're not ready to play, they're gonna say yes. So I'm not saying we are asking the player or anything, but you cannot ask the player for their opinion if they're ready to play, because they're always gonna say yes unless they physically can't run about. So I get it from Potter's point of view why he'd start him, but then I also look at this and I think, hang on a sec, when does something stop becoming bad luck and it becomes a bit of a worrying pattern? Now, you can put the Broja one down to bad luck. Of course it is. And that's not really anything to do with the medical department. But there's no hiding away from the fact now that the last 4 games, if you include the 2 friendlies, we've picked up an injury in each of those games. And it's been a lengthy injury.
Loftus-Cheek, the first of those
Loftus-Cheek in the first 5 minutes at Newcastle before the World Cup, still injured. And then you go to the friendly, Broja picks up the ACL. You then have the behind closed doors game against Brentford at Cobham. Fofana, setback in his recovery. And then you have this game against Bournemouth, and it's a setback for Reece James, the same problem. And I look at it and I think there's got to be something fundamentally wrong here. Either the rehab we're doing is wrong, and like we're not, or the medical department are just not good enough and they're getting timescales completely wrong on things, thinking players are fit to go back when they're not. I don't know what the situation is, but we've got to stop rushing players back because they are suffering reoccurrence of an injury, which I'm no sports scientist by any means or physiotherapist, but that would suggest to me that if in the very first game back that you're picking up a reoccurrence of the same injury, that area wasn't fully healed and fully ready to go.
Yeah. I mean, let me just quickly highlight this comment here by PA. He says, there is a way to work injured players back. Game 1, 10 minutes. Game 2, 30 minutes. 3 start. See, this in general, you would be correct with that. But what you're forgetting about now is that we didn't actually play ever since he came back. Because the World Cup, right? So Reece James has been in training for a month. So if the season was going on as normally, I'm sure that's what we would have done. We would have brought him on for 10, 15, 20 minutes initially, then for half an hour, and then give him a start. But because he'd been training for over a month, we just didn't have any games to give him those substitute appearances. He just obviously did, increase the training load over time. We just did it in training instead of a game. Now, of course, games are always a bit different to training, but there was no game. So what can we do? That's the only thing you could have done. So that's why, while usually, absolutely, you're spot on, PA, that is a little bit different when an injury happens in a situation like this, or when it is in a preseason. When players come in preseason, they still basically start at the start of the season because, they used preseason for that, what you're explaining here. So that is a little bit different, but I do also want to highlight this for Chelsea Ultra, even though I'd ask you in the future, don't use all caps because it's a bit unnecessary. But I didn't see this. Did you guys see this? Because Chelsea Ultra is saying here, people forget Potter said it wasn't ideal to play James before the match. Now, I didn't see
No,
that.
he wasn't saying that. He was basically saying that in the build up to the game, he was saying that like we've got to obviously build Reece's minutes back up, and the Premier League is not the ideal place to do it. And from those comments, I mean, you can look so deeply into these things and microanalyze everything, which is not the best thing to do. But I ascertained from those comments that I perhaps thought it would be unlikely that he would start this game based on those comments.
Yeah,
but
I saw your predicted team. You didn't predict him to start.
I didn't put him in, but I mean, I'm not saying
I did purely on the basis that he played 65 minutes in a friendly. I was like, well, if you can play 65 minutes in a friendly, I think
like hindsight and stuff is a great thing, but I think it's equally important that those people saying, "Oh, we shouldn't have started him because he got injured." He could have come off the bench for half an hour and he could have got injured anyway. So, the fact, people, you shouldn't be blaming the management or the staff, or whatever, for starting him, because he could have easily got injured if he came off from the bench as well. So you can't. I don't think it's fair to criticize on that way, because he could have, as I said, if he came on as a sub, he could have been injured either way. So he didn't get injured because he started. I think it's just unfortunate, but for me, it's just clear that area to suffer a reoccurrence to the same area so quickly, which to me suggests that wasn't fully healed in the first place.
It does absolutely feel like that. But then again, I'm like, but how could he play 65 minutes in a friendly and not get injured? That does suggest it was healed.
Yeah,
right? So it's
tricky.
One.
It's tricky.
Almost as weird as Bazooka here, because James and Chilwell did literally win the World Cup. So what is this? What is this comparison? Not the World Cup, the Champions League. And you're saying Joe Cole never won the Champions League because he was always injured. But James and Chilwell did win the Champions League. So what? I don't understand.
I think he's still triggered off the N'Golo Kante talk.
Yeah,
I'll tell you, man. Kante stands the most sensitive little softies out there, bro.
Exactly. One last thing, or a couple of last things that I do want to discuss, is an update on the Badiashile or Badiashile, however people pronounce it. Why is it not showing me the bloody actual account? There you go. An update on that, because we're basically about to sign the guy from Monaco. Now, obviously, myself, Pys, and I forget it was in the preview, if I'm honest, discussed it already, but Fabrizio Romano with an update on that situation today, saying Chelsea are close to complete their third 2023 signing after Fofana and Andre Santos. Deal at final stages for Benoit Badiashile. All parties feel it will be done soon. Final bits now, and then here we go. Expected personal terms in place. Badiashile wants Chelsea. Reportedly, he rejected Manchester United, PSG, and even a call from Barcelona to tell him, wait until the summer, we want to sign you then. Lewis, I'll start with you. Thoughts, Badiashile? Like, obviously, we decided clearly that Gvardiol is too expensive, which I'm like, okay, we have a lot of players to buy. We can't just buy the most expensive ones in every position. But we do also have Levi Colwill. Now, I'm not an expert on Levi Colwill. Neither am I an expert on Badiashile. But is he going to be that much better? I don't know. Now we're signing him. I hope he just does the best possible. But what are your thoughts on it? And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, subscribe if you haven't already. On the road to 20,000 subscribers, please do subscribe and smash the like button. It doesn't cost you any money, and it really helps me out. Spreading these streams out to more people. But Lewis, thoughts on Benoit Badiashile coming to Chelsea? Like, are you a fan of that? 6'4", 21 years old, left-footed. It sounds good.
I think he definitely fits the pace and power thing that I think a lot of our scouts are looking for, because a lot of our targets are very similar in that regard. In terms of on the ball, he's good in phases, but he's definitely got a bit of a bozo moment in him right now. But I'm also not jumping to conclusions with him just yet. A lot of defenders make mistakes like that in their earlier years, and I think he just needs a bit of time and a bit of experience and better coaching, and maybe he can pull those mistakes out of his game. For about 30 million, it's not bad. Need to see how he develops. I'm interested to see if we go for Gvardiol as well, because if we go for the pair of them, that just guarantees Levi Colwill's leaving, because we got two left-footed centre-backs. We're not going to be keeping a third one, and he's not going to be third in the pecking order. If we don't, then it's probably... Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, bro.
Thank you, sorry. Who's the third one? Because you said we have two already, so you don't think...
No, I think if we go for Gvardiol and we have Badiashile, then
we went for both. Okay, yeah, but it doesn't seem like we're going to go for both, right?
I'm not too sure with Gvardiol. Like, it looks like we're still keeping our options open with him, but if it gets too expensive, I think Chelsea are going to pull out, and Badiashile would be the other option. Because we're going to a back four, Like, I think it's just a main factor for us that we go for at least 2 left-footed centre-backs so they can compete for the left centre-back role. But yeah, I've heard a lot of bad things about Badiashile, but I think it's too early to judge with him. I think a lot of his issues can be coached out of his game.
Very interesting. Very interesting. When we spoke about it in the preview, we read through an article that your expert wrote for Pice's website. And, you know, he was basically saying he's very good at basically everything. He just still has a mistake in him. But
I think that's
I will
normal.
be honest, which 21-year-old centre-back doesn't?
And particularly that's normal for defenders of a young age, is that their decision-making is going to be the thing in their game that's their worst. And that will improve with age and experience. You know, I haven't watched a lot of Badiashile, but by all accounts, you know, he's 6'4", physical presence. He's got a couple of caps for France. He's got over 100 appearances in club football. You know, despite his youth, he's relatively experienced for his age. And I think this makes sense. And I think it's a good deal to get someone in for 35 million euros, who is regarded as one of the best centre-backs in Europe. I think Laurenz Stewart, who's come in from Monaco to Chelsea as part of the new sort of behind-the-scenes team, has been quite instrumental in this deal. And I think for me, whilst Gvardiol would have been fantastic, I do think that this probably means that we're not going to go in for Gvardiol now. I'm not saying we won't look at it again, but I think that's very much on the back burners. The fee is too much. I look at it and I think he's fantastic, but 80, 90 million pounds for Gvardiol is too much money.
If he was the only player we'd need to sign this summer,
different. But the fact of the matter is that, like, I'd rather spend this 30 million on Badiashile and then have that, say, 60, 70 million pounds spare potentially to go and get a midfielder or go and address another area of the squad, because we don't need another centre-back. I think once Badiashile comes in, which he's going to come in, obviously, then I think we're kind of set there. And I like the fact that we're actually signing players and we're planning for the future already, in terms of the fact this is already planning for when Thiago Silva leaves. So this is a guy that might not necessarily start straight away when he arrives in next month, but he's going to have had 6 months at Chelsea where he's going to be learning from great defenders like Koulibaly, like Silva and whatnot. And that 6 months, in terms of next season, that'll be really beneficial for him. And then he might be able to have more of an impact from the start of next season. So I like this, that we're actually planning and bringing players in for the eventuality of when others leave, rather than waiting for players leave and then reacting after they've left. So I like this on all accounts, but obviously, you know, until he puts the shirt on, until we see him play, you can never be so sure.
Yeah, no, exactly. Just quickly, Fabrizio Bromano in the chat. All you've spent the last 10 minutes is just say how shit Mason Mount is. Fair enough. If that's your opinion, I'm not going to tell you that. You're wrong. But if all you're doing for 10 minutes straight is every 10 seconds send a new message that Mason Mount needs to be sold and he's shit, like, what? Come on. Let's not act like 12-year-olds. Well, that's it. I mean, maybe you're not, to be fair. Maybe you're 12. Then fair enough. But then just stop doing it. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, Lewis, your thoughts? I mean, I guess you kind of touched on it already, but if he's going to come in, he's going to come in. He's going to play like... we did still need a centre-back, because Fofana is just injured too much. So at the moment, we don't know when he's going to play. We rely on Thiago Silva way too much anyway. He's 38, so we needed kind of a backup. And in a back four, we only currently have, 3 centre-backs, I guess. Koulibaly, Thiago Silva, and Chalobah. And then obviously Fofana. So... I guess adding one to that is good, right?
Yeah, I mean, it strengthens our squad. I do think he has all the makings of what could be a very good defender for us. I don't know if the instant impact he's going to have for us, especially with the mistakes in his game. I do think that might be an issue for him in his early days, but I think it's something that he can grow out of. We'll have to wait and see on that. It is a bit of speculation, but it's a good fee. He's a good prospect. Everything that our board has been looking at recently, our new scouts, has been very optimistic from my eyes, so I could trust him with this one as well. And yeah, let's see how he does at Chelsea. I don't have a lot of negatives on this.
No, exactly. I mean, I personally probably still would have slightly preferred for us to just use Colwell, if I'm being perfectly honest. Even if he's not super expensive, Badiashile is now going to cost us 30-odd million pounds, when we could have just used Colwell, who's 2 years younger. So
yeah, that's why I'm in two minds about it. But who's to say we don't just loan Colwell out again, or do we just loan out Badiashile next season? It could be either or. So
Could be.
you never know. There's still a lot to speculate on with that one.
Absolutely. And then lastly, I mean, in this tweet from Fabrizio Romano we had up now, it was already touching on it, but one of these signings for 2023 has already been announced by Chelsea yesterday when they wrote Chelsea FC has reached a pre-agreement with Molde FK for the transfer of David Dacho Fofana, a 20-year-old Ivorian striker who plays more like a left wing, even though he plays as a striker, who's going to join the first team initially, and he's going to be looked at, but there's not necessarily a decision made yet whether he's going to stay in the squad or whether he'll be a loan out or whatever else. And similar things go for Andre Santos. That one hasn't quite been announced yet from Vasco da Gama in Brazil. He will also join Chelsea come January 1st, and then will be assessed, and we'll see then where we will loan him, when we will loan him, blah, blah, blah.
I think he has to go on loan to get the work permit because he hasn't played enough. He hasn't played enough games. He has to go on loan, yeah.
But could he, without the work, could he play for the under-21s, or would he not be allowed to do that?
I don't think that qualifies for the relevant European experience.
No, yeah, no. In the meantime, before he
I've got no idea. I don't know.
Okay, yeah. Well, I don't know either, if I'm honest. So I'm sure they'll figure it out. They're not stupid. So, but in terms of David Dacho Fofana, Lewis, what do you think about that one? Obviously, Broja's injured, so I see it as at least a small chance, unless we sign another striker, which I very much doubt now in January, because obviously we've already got Nkunku for the summer, so we're really going to sign another one, unless the Joao Felix stuff materializes to anything, which I also doubt, but we'll see. That he maybe stays until the end of the season and then goes on loan for Fane now that Broja is injured. But in general, I mean, he looks good, but he's obviously played in Norway, so if we question Portugal and Benfica in terms of level, now obviously for very different money, but still, then Norway is obviously miles and miles and miles away from the Premier League. And again, I make the same comparison as I did the other day. Erling Haaland went from Norway to Austria. If Austria is better than Norway, Norway is not very good.
But also, Haaland was miles better than this guy anyway.
Yeah, no, exactly that. Yeah. But still, regardless of whether he's better or not, he still made a step in between the top league.
Oh yeah, yeah. The normal path out of Norway is like generally to go to Austria, Belgium, or Holland or somewhere like that, or maybe France. I don't think anyone's gone from like Norwegian league straight to Premier League.
Only not to a top 6 club.
No,
top 8 maybe these days.
Yeah,
but at the same time, are you happy about it, Lewis? I mean, he's Ivorian. We have some good experience with Ivorian strikers.
Yeah. As an option, I think looks like a good prospect again. Fits the pace and power thing that we're looking for. He's got the build of someone who could do well in the Premier League. From the limited footage I've seen, looks good in tight spaces. Looks like a good finisher. Apparently he's good at whipping in crosses, but I'd rather him be on the end of crosses. So I'm not going to focus too much on that, but that might make him a good.
He loves to drift out wide, though. Like he's not a striker that stays in the middle, apparently. So
yeah,
that's good for us. That's good for us if that's the case. But right now we ain't going to do anything. If we start him, Mount and Havertz aren't going to create anything for him, so he's just going to starve like every other striker will. But it's another investment for the future. So maybe in 2 or 3 years' time, it will be a very good option for us. Right now, it could be a smart investment, but it's low risk, high reward. If he doesn't do well, he doesn't harm anyone's progress. If he does well, we've got a gem on the cheap. Exactly what we've been asking for years.
Yeah, no, exactly. I can't disagree too much, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. One thing I do want to quickly mention, maybe other people haven't heard that one yet, which I do like on his. And Jester, by the way, I saw your message. I will get it up after we're done with this before we round this one. I appreciate it. What I like is the fact, obviously, he's Ivorian, they're French speaking. And apparently he had offers from both Molde, where he, of course, now went to and we are signing him from. And he also had offers from France. And the fact that he chose for him, much more uncomfortable, more out of his comfort zone, more difficult step. Maybe not on a footballing level sense, but he might have had offers from Ligue 2 rather than Ligue 1, right? So it might be a bit different. But the fact that he chose that option, and also, seems to have been a Chelsea fan for a long time. Obviously, I'm sure Drogba plays a part. Probably half of Ivory Coast are Chelsea fans for that reason in that age group. But the fact that he acts like that and didn't take the easy option, but took the hard option and found his feet in a country with completely different culture. Like, it doesn't get much different than Ivory Coast to Norway. Like, it doesn't get much more different. So the fact that he went for that, I do like it. I do like it. I do rate it. But Charlie, similar thoughts to Lewis. Let's see what he does to start with, and then we probably make final decisions on him either now or the latest in the summer, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think he's obviously clearly a prospect, and as Lewis said, like it's win-win almost for the club, because he comes in and if he does well, then we've got someone on the cheap, which is what we're trying to do now in this situation, is get players before they become 60, 70, 80 million pound players. So we're trying to get them before, obviously, they develop. And if it doesn't quite work out, then we'll sell him for more than we bought him for, and we make some money on someone. But I'm also fully prepared for the fact that this guy might never play for the club. There's, I think, yes, it's great to be excited, but the difference between, and whilst the Norwegian league is perhaps not quite as bad as what people may think, it's a million miles away from the Premier League. So he's obviously got those attributes that he can obviously make that transition, but there's a lot of parts of his game that need to improve. And obviously he's only just turned 20, so there's plenty of time to coach him and to make the thing improve on his weaknesses. But for me, look, by all means, assess him in training, but I wouldn't suspect him to stick about. But then I also wouldn't expect us to be able to buy a striker if we end up bringing Enzo Fernandez in January, in which case he may have to stick around because we haven't got an endless pot of money to choose from. So yeah, I think it's an exciting one, but he's going to be one of those that goes out on loan. And I don't expect to see him probably play for Chelsea until 2024, really.
Yeah, no, neither do I. I mean, it still feels like this is a signing that will more be useful and used for whenever we have the multi-club model ready, which is partly why I don't fully understand why we're signing the player already before we have the other clubs. But sure. I mean, hey, I haven't watched the guy play other than from little clips that I've seen. So maybe he's way better than I give him credit for. So, from that point of view, Rip Pele. Is that what you just said, Jester? Apparently breaking. Pele has died aged 82. His manager confirmed he died in hospital.
Shit.
That's true. But if it's true, rest in peace, Pele.
I think that is true.
As much as you were a bit of a merchant to claim some friendly goals, still, rest in peace, one of the greatest ever that I never got to see, of course, but one of the greatest ever. So
yeah, he has. He has.
Yeah, no, yeah, he has.
Sad times. Well, I was going to bring up one last thing because it's a report from Portugal that says Enzo Fernandez is inclined to leave Benfica in January and accept Chelsea's proposal. I'm not sure about all these Portuguese outlets. I mean, they've said a lot of waffle over everything, basically. And also, it's not really a case of Fernandez accepting Chelsea's proposal. It's a case of do Benfica accept the proposal of not paying the release clause but in different terms. It doesn't, Enzo obviously needs to agree as well, but I feel like the bigger hold up here is going to be Benfica, not Enzo. So, yeah. But hey, I think, ladies and gentlemen, on that note, that unfortunately the legend Pele has passed away, I think we're going to round this one out. If you're new here, please be sure to subscribe. That'd be massively appreciated. Just one click of a button. It doesn't cost you any money, just like the like button straight next to it, which you can click just after subscribing. And if you've subscribed already, just hit the like button and the notification bell button and select all so you don't miss any future streams. Please do subscribe to both Lewis and Charlie. Their links are down in the description. Carefree Lewis G and the Blues Brothers. So subscribe to both of them for their content. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for watching. Up the Chelsea, upwards and onwards, and we'll see you next time.